Hello, I'm Emily and welcome back to my channel. To go along with the transitional stays that we just made, I wanted to make a Regency round gown. This is a round gown from about the 1790s time period. So it's going to have that empire waistline from the Regency period, but the skirt will be quite fuller than you think of with the, stereotypical Regency outfit. So that fullness of the skirt will be balanced out by some slender, long, like 3/4 length sleeves. And when I think of this dress style, it really makes me think of like a cross between the chemise a la reine, which was popularized by Marie Antoinette and came a little bit earlier, and what you think of with like Regency styles from more the time period of around 1800. I'm going to be using the Simplicity pattern from American Duchess, and this is the one you've probably seen it before. I know a lot of other people have used this to make their 1790s round gowns, so quite popular. I think the only changes that I'm going to have to make to it are to shorten the skirt, and then I'm also going to widen the armholes. So a lot of extant Regency gowns that I've seen have this feature where the armholes are cut very deep into the back, and it creates this illusion of like a really narrow back, and then the sleeves are gathered down into it. I just think it looks really elegant and fun. I love the extant examples that are cut this way, and I think it's really unique to the time period. So I want to try to include it in my gown design. I'll be using a beautiful sheer cotton that I got from Burnley and Trowbridge, and it has these really pretty tiny little vertical stripes in it. Not enough to where you probably will even notice looking at it, but just enough to give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more texture to the finished gown. It is a sheer fabric, but that isn't going to be a problem because we just got done making our stays, our shift, our petticoat to go underneath, and so that's going to kind of take care of the modesty. So even though we're using this sheer fabric, we'll be okay. So let's get to it and see how this pattern makes up. So the first thing I did was make a mock-up of the underbodice. This pattern comes with an underbodice which has little bust darts in it, and then an overbodice which is basically the same shape but just much longer across the front of the body, and it will get gathered down in the final version. So I started making the mock-up of the underbodice, and then the only thing I changed was to take it in a little bit at the shoulders to make it a little shorter, and then I also wanted those deep cutouts around the armholes, so we will see next how I did that. So I basically just took that underbodice mock-up and put it on my dress form, and then took my fabric pen to it and marked out where I thought the armhole should go, cut that out, and saw how it looked. Then I took the underbodice completely apart so that I could perfectly replicate the cut that I had made on one side on the other side. Then I took those underbodice pieces and used them as my pattern to cut out the delicate overlay fabric. And the only difference there being that I did use the pattern piece for the front part because, as I said before, it's that much longer piece, but I did make sure to transfer all of the other sort of changes that I made to the underbodice to that overbodice pattern. One thing that was really great about this method was that I already had cut the curved seam from when I constructed the underbodice, so I was able to perfectly replicate those cuts and know that I wasn't going to cut them into the fabric too much into where my seam would need to be, and this made it a lot easier to get those curved seams to come together nicely. So then I was able to sew up those curved back seams of the bodice. And then next I stitched a row of reinforcement really close to the edge of the front bodice piece, and this just makes it so that that edge won't stretch weird and get all wonky on the bias of the fabric. And then after that I did go ahead and put the under bodice itself back together, finishing off the edges with a nice narrow hem. So this is one half of the front of the outer bodice. We have some stay stitching to keep that edge nice and crisp there. And then from this point, we've cut in a notch and folded over twice to hem. But before we do that, we have this cord which has been stitched to the inside here. And I'm going to stitch right along the edge here at the top to encase the cord. And this will be a drawstring for the bodice. So with the bodice pieces assembled, the next step was to sew all the pieces of the skirt together, and I wanted to try and maximize my fabric so that I wouldn't have to cut any fabric, or so that I wouldn't have to have any vertical seams that were not on the edge of the fabric, so that way I didn't have to have any bulky seams. I could just leave the fabric free on either side because it's not gonna fray. So I ended up with a little bit of a fuller skirt than what the pattern calls for. All I did was make sure that I placed the fabric like appropriately around the skirt so that there is a seam directly down the center front, because we need to be able to open and close the gown at the front to get into it. So the next step was to attach the over bodice to the skirt in the front bodice piece. These just get straight stitched together, and then we will put another drawstring in right at that waistline so that they can get sort of cinched up together at the waist. Then the remaining fabric all around the waistline of the skirt needs to get gathered up into the back of the bodice. So I'm just doing a row of gathering stitches here so that I can draw that up. And then once it's all gathered up, just stitching over the gathers, attaching it to the rest of the bodice. Next, the underbodice and overbodice are stitched together at the sort of back top neckline down to about the shoulders, facing right sides together, and then these will get flipped over so that the lining sits on the inside. I have made just a couple of small adjustments to the sleeve pattern. First, I shortened it here. And then, of course, smoothed out that line from having shortened it on either side. And then, because I sort of expanded the armhole a little bit so that it would cut further into my back, I have done the same thing here. So given more space in that part. And it'll get gathered down so it doesn't have to be exact. I did not do a mock-up of the sleeve because it pretty closely matches the size of one of my self-drafted sleeves, which my self-drafted sleeve did not leave seam allowance, so this one does, pretty well matches. So I'm hoping that this sleeve will work without having much trouble. And then the other thing is I left this at the full length sleeve. I'm not quite sure what kind of sleeve that I want to have yet, if I want it to stop like above my elbow, at my elbow, slightly below it, or even have long sleeves. So I cut this at long sleeve, and then I'll probably make the final decision later once I can try it on. So the sleeves get sewn together up both sides, first all the way up to the elbow point and then up the other side all the way up the length of the sleeve. Then I set the sleeve into the armhole and sewed it in place. And I tried to evenly distribute the fabric here and make it so that any gathers would be towards the back side of the sleeve. Okay, I am not happy with these sleeves. They are very oddly shaped. Like they pull too much across here. This is, we're looking at the back. I've pleated them here, take up the like extra fabric, but they just, it's like they need to be a little narrower here maybe, but more fabric needed this way. So I think I need to just add more here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off one of these sleeves and basically like use the spreading method that you do in paper pattern making. Basically like take the sleeve apart, use that spreader method, and then use that to cut a new sleeve. So in the end, this is the sleeve pattern that I came up with as compared to this, the old sleeve pattern that did not work. And with that, the dress was done. Thank you so much for watching and sticking around for this video. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a like. And if you want to see more historical costuming videos, please do subscribe to my channel. See you next time.